On my 20th birthday, my parents sold my entire collection of priceless tools to fund my brother's education. When I told my father he'd sold my future, he said, "You live under my roof." So I left that night without a word. This morning, my father stormed into the backyard to find the workshop I built completely empty, and now he's realizing he just made the biggest mistake of his life. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The day had started with a dull, throbbing headache, a familiar companion after a 60-hour work week. It was my 20th birthday, but we'd postponed any celebration. My older brother, Miles, had an important exam, and my father, Arthur, insisted we shouldn't distract him. I didn't mind. All I wanted was a quiet evening, a cup of tea, and a few hours of peace in my workshop. My workshop was my sanctuary. It wasn't just the dusty, spider-webbed shed that came with the house. It was a fully insulated, humidity-controlled clean room that I had built myself, board by board, over the last 3 years. It was where I, Mia, stopped being a disappointment and started being a luthier. It was where I built things that could sing. I pushed open the door, expecting the familiar, sweet scent of rosewood and spruce. Instead, I was met with silence and a faint smell of sawdust. The room was empty. My breath hitched. "No," I whispered, flicking on the overhead light. It was a sterile, fluorescent buzz over a vacant space. My German-made workbench gone, my humidity cabinet gone, my pegboard wall stripped bare. And the tools? My God, the tools. My hand-rubbed Japanese chisels, my specialized router jigs, my grandfather's irreplaceable 1950s spoke shaves, all of it gone. The entire space had been picked clean. A cold, sick feeling washed over me, far worse than the headache. I ran back into the house, my boots echoing on the hardwood floor. My parents, Arthur and Brenda, and my brother Miles were sitting at the dinner table, laughing about something on Miles's laptop. "Where are my tools?" The laughter stopped. My father, Arthur, looked up, his expression unbothered. He meticulously wiped his mouth with a napkin. "Ah, Mia, good. We were wondering when you'd notice." "Notice?" My voice was trembling. "The shed is empty. Where is my workshop? Where is everything?" My mother, Brenda, fidgeted, refusing to meet my eyes. She just picked at a loose thread on the placemat. Miles, ever the golden child, sighed with dramatic annoyance, as if I'd interrupted his favorite TV show. "We sold it," Arthur said, his voice as flat and practical as the insurance claims he processed every day. "We got a fantastic price for the lot. It all went to a collector this afternoon." I couldn't process the words. "You sold it, all of it, my workbench, my grandfather's tools." "Don't be dramatic, Mia," Arthur said, taking a sip of water. "They're just tools. You don't need them right now. It was all for the family fund. Miles's final year of law school is more expensive than we anticipated, and this was a logical way to cover the gap." The family fund. A mythical bank account that, in its entire existence, had only ever funded one person, Miles. My part-time job checks, my savings, and now, apparently, my entire future. It all went to the family fund. "You sold my future," I whispered, the reality of it crushing my chest. "Those weren't just tools. That was my career. That was my apprenticeship. Some of those were one of a kind. They were Grandpa's." Arthur's face hardened. This was the part he enjoyed, the part where he got to be the patriarch. "Your hobby wasn't paying the bills, Mia. Miles's career will. You're 20 years old, you can get new ones. You are a part of this family, and you will contribute." "Contribute?" I was shouting now, the tears of shock turning hot with rage. "I've been contributing. I've been working 40 hours a week at the shop and another 20 at the diner to pay for those tools. You had no right." "I have every right," he boomed, standing up. His chair scraped violently against the floor. "You live under my roof. You eat my food. Everything you think you own is under my authority until you are self-sufficient. And this, guitar-making fantasy, is not self-sufficiency." The words hung in the air, cold and final. My mother flinched but said nothing. Miles just scrolled on his phone, pointedly ignoring the entire detonation of my life. You live under my roof. It wasn't a statement. It was a cage. He had used that line to control my choices, my time, and my money for years. He saw me as a failed investment because I'd chosen a skilled trade over a 4-year degree he couldn't afford anyway. He saw my passion as a liability. I looked at his smug, righteous face. I ked at my mother's willful ignorance. I looked at my brother's profound indifference. And in that single, terrible moment, something inside me didn't just break, it hardened. It turned from molten grief into cold, sharp steel. Okay, I said. My voice was suddenly calm, so calm it surprised even me. Arthur blinked, expecting more yelling. Okay, good, I'm glad you're finally seeing reason. He sat back down, picking up his fork. Now, your mother made lasagna. Sit down and eat. We can talk about getting you some new beginner tools from the hardware store next week. I didn't move, I just stared at him. He had sold my past and my future for a few $1,000s to fund his perfect son. He thought he had taken everything. He thought he had won. But he had forgotten one crucial thing. No, thank you, I said. I'm not hungry. I turned around, walked up the stairs to my room, and locked the door. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I pulled the duffel bag out from under my bed. I didn't know it yet, but my father had just handed me the key to my own cage. The betrayal was so total, so absolute, it was almost clarifying. It was worse than any argument, worse than any punishment. It was a fundamental rejection of who I was, and it would be the last one I ever accepted. The first hour in my room was a vacuum. The shock was so profound that my body went numb, a defense mechanism against the sheer scale of the violation. I sat on the edge of my bed, duffel bag at my feet, and just stared. I saw the cheap particle board desk my father had forced me to keep, the pale blue walls my mother had chosen. This room had never been mine, not really. It was just a holding cell, a place I was allowed to sleep while my real life existed in the shed. And they had sold it. They had invited a stranger into my space, my sacred, private world, and let them haul away my life, piece by piece, while I was at work. They had sold my grandfather's tools, the ones he'd put in my hands when I was 10, his calloused fingers guiding mine over the gentle curve of a violin's body. They had sold the custom-built temperature gauge I'd saved for 6 months to buy. They had sold my dream for the price of a used car. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Miles. I ignored it. It buzzed again, a text. Miles, Dad's angry. Just come down and apologize so we can have a normal night. You're ruining your own birthday. Ruin, I almost laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound in the quiet room. My birthday. They had done this on my birthday. The cruelty of it was almost artistic. A soft knock came at the door. Mia, honey, please open the door. My mother's voice, soft, pleading, and completely useless. Go away, Mom. Don't be like this, she said, her voice wheedling. Your father, he's just trying to do what's best for the family. You know how much pressure he's under with Miles's tuition. He didn't mean to upset you. He didn't mean to. I was on my feet, my hands clenched. He sold thousands of dollars of my property without my permission. That's not upsetting me, Mom. That's theft. Oh, don't use that word, she hissed, her voice suddenly sharp. That's a terrible, ugly word, Mia. We are a family. It's all family money. You'll understand when you're older. Now, please come out. You're making a scene and Miles needs to study. Miles? It was always Miles. Miles, the 23-year-old law student, the golden boy, the one our family's entire orbit was built around. His future was the one that mattered. His needs were the only ones that were real. My future, the one I was building with my own hands, the one I was already succeeding in, was just a fantasy because it involved sawdust and calluses instead of courtrooms and briefcases. I'm not coming out, I said, my voice flat. There was a long, frustrated sigh from the other side of the door. Fine, she said, her tone martyred. Stay in there and sulk, but you're only hurting yourself. Your father is a practical man, Mia. You know that. He did what had to be done. The footsteps retreated. I was alone again. I looked at my phone, a new text from Miles. Miles, whatever. If you're going to be a baby, I'm going to the library. Don't ruin Dad's mood any more than you already have. I need him to consign a new loan. My blood ran cold. A new loan, so the sale of my tools wasn't even enough. It was just a drop in the bucket. They had burned my future for kindling, and they were already looking for the next forest to clear. I stood up and began to pack. Not with the frantic panic of an escape, but with the methodical precision of a planned demolition. I packed my clothes, my toiletries, the few books I owned, and the small tin box that held my birth certificate and passport. My father, Arthur, was a practical man. My mother, Brenda, was his enabler. My brother, Miles, was the black hole they fed. They were a closed system, and I was the only moving part they could liquidate. Arthur believed. Ed, he had taken everything of value. He had sold my tools, my benches, my machines. In his mind, the case was closed. He had converted a hobby into cash and solved his problem. But as I zipped the duffel bag, a slow, cold smile touched my lips. My father, the practical insurance adjuster, was an expert in assessing the value of things he could see. A car, a house, a box of tools. He saw the world in dollar signs and depreciation. But he was an amateur. He was sloppy. He'd gone into my workshop, taken the obvious, shiny things, and hadn't looked any deeper. He'd left the most valuable things behind. They had sold the tools, yes, but they had forgotten about the wood. They had forgotten about the massive, carefully curated stacks of rare tone wood I kept hidden in a false-bottom cabinet under the floorboards I'd installed. They didn't know the difference between a plank of pine and a 50-year-old, master-grade plank of Brazilian rosewood. They didn't know that the scraps I'd been currying for 5 years were worth more than all the tools combined. They'd forgotten what I was capable of building, and they had forgotten who I learned from. They'd forgotten about Patrick. I picked up my phone. It wasn't my brother or my mother I was going to call. I dialed the number of my mentor, the man who was more of a father to me than Arthur had ever been. "Patrick," I said, my voice steady, "I need your help, and I need your truck. My father just sold my tools." There was a pause, and then a low, dangerous voice on the other end. "He what? I'm on my way." My father, Arthur, always said he respected hard work, but what he meant was a paycheck I understand. My passion for lutherie was, in his eyes, a whimsical waste of time. "You get splinters," he'd say. "I get quarterly bonuses. See the difference?" He was an insurance adjuster, a man who spent his days assigning dollar values to other people's tragedies. He was practical to the point of being cruel, and he saw no return on investment in my chosen craft. My brother, Miles, was the opposite. He was Arthur's prize-winning racehorse. Miles was 23, enrolled in a prestigious law school, and possessed an effortless charm that made people want to give him things. The family fund was established the day he got his acceptance letter. From that moment on, the entire family's financial gravity shifted to orbit around him. My mother, Brenda, took on extra admin work from home, her fingers flying across a keyboard to pay for his textbooks. My father canceled his fishing trips and delayed repairs on the house, all to ensure Miles's tuition was paid on time. And I was the family's secret, secondary income stream. My journey into lutherie hadn't been a hobby, it was an inheritance. My grandfather, my mother's father, had been a luthier in the old country. He was a quiet, meticulous man who smelled of varnish and sawdust. When I was 10, he'd placed his smallest chisel in my hand and said, "The wood already knows what it wants to be, Mia. You just have to listen." He passed away 2 years later, leaving me his entire chest of tools. They were worn smooth by his hands, stained with 60 years of work. They were priceless. To my father, they were just old junk in a box. When I started my apprenticeship with Patrick, the most respected luthier in the state, Arthur was baffled. "You're going to be a shop girl, for minimum wage, when you could be getting a business degree." He didn't understand that the minimum wage was just the start. I worked 40 hours a week for Patrick, learning the art. Then, I'd go to a diner and work another 20, slinging hash to save up. Every dollar went into my future. I bought a second-hand lathe. I saved for a year to get a professional-grade bandsaw. I spent months building my workshop in the shed, insulating it, wiring it, and installing a complex humidity system to protect the delicate woods. My family saw none of this. They just saw the shed door close. When I'd come in, exhausted and covered in sawdust, my mother would sigh. "I just wish you'd spend more time with us, Mia. Your brother's home for the weekend. Can't you just be normal for a night?" Normal, to them, normal meant contributing to the bottomless pit of Miles's ambition. Last year, when Miles needed a new top-of-the-line laptop for his intensive studies, Arthur had suggested I sell my car. It was an old, beaten-up sedan, but it was my car, the one I used to get to both of my jobs. "It's just practical, Mia," Arthur had explained, as if I were a child. "Miles needs this for his career. You can take the bus. It's a small sacrifice for the family." I fought him hard, but Brenda wore me down. "Please, honey, don't upset your father. It's just for a little while. Think of how proud we'll be when Miles is a lawyer." I caved. I sold the car. Miles got his laptop. I started taking the bus, adding 2 hours of travel time to my already crushing days. And Miles? He used the laptop to stream basketball games and trade stocks, which he was learning about in a very expensive elective. This was the pattern. My sacrifices were practical. Miles's entitlements were investments. Now, sitting on my bed with my bag packed, I understood the full, ugly truth. My father didn't just resent my hobby, he resented me. He resented that I was building a life that didn't revolve around him. He resented that I had a passion he couldn't quantify or control. And he resented, most of all, that I had something of value that he could take. Selling my tools wasn't a last resort. It was a power play. It was his way of reminding me that he was in charge, that my dreams were disposable, and that my only practical value was as a resource for his golden child. He had ripped the heart out of my world to pawn it for his son's comfort. He thought he was teaching me a lesson about practicality. He thought he was showing me who was boss. But all he'd done was confirm what I'd long suspected. In this house, I wasn't a daughter. I was collateral. The headlights of a large truck swept across my bedroom wall. Patrick was here. I unzipped my bag, took out the small tin box, and removed my house key. I walked downstairs. The house was quiet. My parents were in the living room, the murmur of the television, a familiar backdrop. Miles was probably still at the library, blissfully unaware that his future was now funded by the theft of mine. I placed the key on the kitchen counter. Next to it, I laid a single, simple note. I didn't write it in anger. I wrote it with the cold, clear precision of one of my grandfather's chisels. "You sold my tools, I kept my future. Don't contact me." I walked out the back door, closing it softly behind me. I didn't look back. I climbed into the cab of Patrick's truck, the smell of sawdust and old coffee a welcome comfort. "He's going to regret this," Patrick said, his voice a low growl. He put the truck in gear. "I know," I said. "Let's go, we have work to do." The rage didn't hit me until we were on the highway. It came in a sudden, blinding wave, so intense it made me shake. It wasn't the hot, yelling rage I'd felt in the dining room. This was a cold, crystalline fury. It was the fury of the violated, the betrayed. But under it, something new was forming. Resolve. "He didn't just sell the tools, Patrick," I said, my voice tight. "He sold the benches, the router table I built from scratch, the ventilation system, the dehumidifier. He let a stranger pick my life apart." Patrick gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. He was a man in his late 60s, with kind eyes and hands like scarred leather. He was a master, and he'd seen my potential from day one. He'd become the father Arthur never was. "He is a fool, Mia," Patrick said. "A destructive, ignorant fool, but he's also sloppy. What did he miss?" "Everything," I said, a grim smile touching my lips. "He missed everything that matters." We pulled into a 24-hour equipment rental lot. "I need a 16-foot box truck," Patrick said to the sleepy-eyed clerk, "and 2 heavy-duty dollies and a hand truck." He paid in cash. An hour later, we were parked 2 streets away from my house. I can't let them see your truck, I explained. We need more than just us, Patrick said, looking at the dark house. That's a lot of weight. I know, I said. I called in some favors. Just then, 2 more cars pulled up. It was 3 guys from the local Woodworkers Guild, friends of mine and Patrick's. They were big, capable, and, after hearing a 30-second version of the story, quietly furious. We work in silence, I said, handing them all gloves. We park around the corner, we don't use the front door. We go through the back gate, straight to the shed. We take everything. For the next 3 hours, we operated like a ghost crew. We backed the truck down the alley, killing the engine. We used the dollies to move the heavy pieces, our movements practiced and silent. First, my 2 remaining industrial workbenches, the ones Arthur had missed because they were in the dirty section of the shed. Then, my drill press and band saw, which had been hidden under a tarp. And then, the grand prize. I knelt by the far wall and used a pry bar to lift 3 planks of the flooring I'd installed. Beneath it was a shallow, lead-lined crawlspace, perfectly humidity-controlled. And inside was my treasure. It was my collection of tone wood. To a layman like my father, it was just a stack of lumber. To a luthier, it was a bank vault. There were 30 sets of master-grade Sitka spruce, aged for 10 years. There were multiple billets of flamed maple, a dozen sets of Indian rosewood, and, in a special case, 3 sets of pre-ban Brazilian rosewood. That wood alone was worth more than Miles's tuition. I had been curing it, saving it for the day I would be skilled enough to use it. One by one, we passed the planks out, handling them with more care than most people handle crystal. We loaded them into the truck, stacking them with professional care. We took the shelves they'd been on. We took the insulation panels that were left over. We took my shop vac. By 4:00 a.m., the shed was a hollow shell. It was exactly as it had been when my parents moved in, an empty, useless box. We drove to Patrick's shop, a large, beautiful barn of a building 30 miles away. We unloaded everything into his spacious, secure storage area. When the last piece was in, the sun was just starting to tint the sky pink. The guys from the guild, true heroes, just nodded, accepted my whispered, tearful thanks, and drove off into the dawn. Patrick put a heavy hand on my shoulder. "You're safe here, Mia. There's an apartment above the shop. It's yours as long as you need it." "Thank you, Patrick," I whispered, the exhaustion and adrenaline finally catching up. "Now," he said, handing me a hot cup of coffee from a thermos, "let's find your tools." This was the clever trap. My father, Arthur, was an adjuster. He knew how to liquidate, but he wasn't a specialist. He didn't know the luthier community. It's a small, tight-knit world. There are only a handful of dealers in the tri-state area who would even know what those tools were, let alone have the money to buy them. At 8:00 a.m. sharp, Patrick and I sat in his office, a list of phone numbers between us. "You call the pawn shops," he said. "Ask for musical instrument tools. I'll call the dealers. I'll start with Henderson." Henderson's Fine Instruments was the biggest, most reputable dealer in the region. Mr. Henderson and Patrick had a 30-year history of friendly rivalry and mutual respect. I spent an hour getting nowhere with pawnbrokers who had no idea what a spoke shave was. As I was hanging up with another confused manager, I heard Patrick's voice in the other room. His tone suddenly iron. "He said what, John? He said his daughter gave up the hobby? Yes, that's her. No, she's right here, she's my apprentice. He told you they were his to sell? I see. John, that man didn't just sell you his daughter's tools. He sold you stolen goods. Her grandfather's collection was in that lot. They are irreplaceable." There was a long pause. I held my breath. "I understand your position," Patrick said, his voice cold. "And you understand mine. That man, Arthur, has committed fraud. He has defrauded you and he has stolen from my apprentice. No, I don't want you to call the police. Not yet. I have a better idea. Tell me, John, when does he come in to sign the final consignment papers?" The morning exploded. I was in the apartment above Patrick's shop, which was quickly becoming my new home. It was small, but the entire place smelled like aged wood and varnish, a scent that felt safer than any place I'd ever lived. My phone, which I'd left on silent, was lit up like a Christmas tree. 15 missed calls from Mother, 8 from Arthur, a stream of increasingly hysterical texts from Miles. Miles, 7:30 a.m., where are you? Mom's having a panic attack. Miles, 7:45 a.m., seriously, Mia, this isn't funny. Dad just went to the shed. He's calling the police. You'd better get back here and return his stuff. Miles, 7:46 a.m., his stuff MIA, THATS theft. Miles, 8:15 a.m., Mom is in tears. You've really done it this time. You are the most selfish person I have ever met. Dad is driving to your little shop to talk to your boss. The last one made my blood run cold. I ran downstairs. Patrick, my father is on his way here. Patrick was on the phone, a grim look on his face. He held up a hand, silencing me. John, he's on his way to my shop right now. He thinks Mia is here. Perfect. Let him come. It saves us a trip. No, just stay where you are. I'll handle this. He hung up and looked at me. John Henderson is on his way. He's not happy. It seems your father not only sold him your tools, but he also sold him my Festool sander that you'd borrowed. He committed fraud against a man who buys and sells businesses for a living. Your father is a spectacular moron. At that moment, a car screeched to a halt in the gravel driveway. My father's gray sedan. Arthur stormed out of the car, his face a mask of purple rage. He marched toward the shop, saw me standing in the doorway, and pointed a finger. You, he roared. You think this is a joke? You think you can steal from me? I am pressing charges, Mia. You emptied my shed. That is theft of my property. Patrick stepped out from behind me, wiping his hands on a rag. He was a good foot taller than my father and built like the oak trees he worked with. Arthur, I presume, Patrick said, his voice a calm, deep rumble. My father faltered, his bravado shrinking in the face of this imposing stranger. Who are you? I'm Patrick, he said, Mia's mentor, and you are on my property, yelling at my apprentice. You need to lower your voice. I will not, Arthur sputtered, regaining a fraction of his courage. She stole my lumber, my workbenches. I am here to get them back. Your lumber? I asked, stepping forward. My voice was ice. You mean the 50-year-old Brazilian rosewood sets, or the master-grade Sitka spruce? Tell me, Dad, what exactly did you plan to do with them? Build a birdhouse. Arthur's face went blank. He had no idea what I was talking about. It's wood. It was in my shed. It was in my workshop, I corrected him. The one I built with my own money. The wood I purchased with my own paychecks. You don't get to sell my future and keep my inventory. He was losing control, his narrative collapsing. You live under my roof. That makes it my property. That's the law. Is it? A new voice cut through the tension. A black Mercedes had pulled silently into the driveway. A man in a sharply tailored suit stepped out. This was John Henderson. He looked calm, collected, and absolutely lethal. Mr. Arthur? Henderson asked, though it wasn't a question. Yes, my father said, puffing up his chest, sensing a potential ally. This girl, my daughter, she stole. Mr. Arthur, Henderson interrupted, his voice like silk-wrapped steel. My name is John Henderson. You visited my showroom yesterday. You sold me a collection of luthier tools. A flicker of panic crossed Arthur's face. This was not going as planned. I did. A fine collection. My daughter's, as I said, she gave up the hobby. That's interesting, Henderson said, taking a step closer. Because Mia here is one of the most promising apprentices in the state, and her boss, Patrick, is my oldest friend. What's also interesting is that the collection you sold me contained several heirloom tools that belonged to Mia's grandfather, which she can prove. And it also contained a $1,200 sander that belongs to Patrick, which he can also prove. Arthur turned a shade of pale gray. You lied to me, Mr. Arthur, Henderson said, his voice dangerously pleasant. You came into my place of business and you sold me stolen goods. That is fraud. That is a felony. My father's first instinct was to lash out, not at Henderson but at me. You set me up," he shrieked, pointing at me. "This is your fault, you're trying to ruin me." "You did a fine job of that yourself," Patrick said, crossing his arms. I'll give the money back," Arthur stammered, looking at Henderson. "It's a misunderstanding, a family matter." "We are long past misunderstanding," Henderson said. "I paid you $25,000 for that collection, which I've now discovered is worth nearly twice that, meaning you are as stupid as you are criminal. But I'm not a man who likes complications. I want my $25,000 back. Now." "Now I can't," Arthur said, his eyes wide. "It's in the family fund, it's for my son's tuition, it's already allocated." "That sounds," Henderson said, pulling out his phone, "like a you problem. I, on the other hand, am about to have a calling the police solution." "No," Arthur shouted, the panic was real now. "No police, please, I need to make a call, I can move it, I just need a day." Henderson looked at Patrick. Patrick looked at me. "He doesn't get a day," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I didn't get a day, I didn't even get a warning, you pay him back right now." My father looked at me, his eyes filled with a hatred so pure it took my breath away. He had been cornered. The patriarch, the man in charge, had been trapped by his own, practical little theft. "Fine," he hissed, pulling out his phone and opening his banking app. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely type. "You've ruined this family, Mia. I hope you're happy. You've just stolen your brother's future." The irony was so thick, I almost choked on it. "No, Dad," I said, as he furiously transferred the funds. "I just saved mine." The $25,000 vanished from my father's account with a digital swoosh. John Henderson's phone pinged. He checked it, nodded once, and put it back in his pocket. "A pleasure doing business with you, Arthur," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "The tools will be delivered back to this address," he gestured to Patrick's shop, "within the hour. If you ever, and I mean ever, step foot in my showroom again, I will have you arrested for trespassing." He gave a polite nod to Patrick and me, got in his Mercedes, and was gone. My father stood in the gravel driveway, vibrating with a level of impotent rage I had never seen. He was a deflated bully, his authority stripped bare. He opened his mouth, probably to let loose a final, wounding volley of insults. I just held up my hand. "Don't," I said, "don't say another word, get in your car and go home." "Mia, you don't understand what you've done," he whispered, his voice hoarse. That was everything. That was Miles's entire semester. "And the $25,000 you got for my tools was my entire future," I shot back. "We are not the same. You did this to teach me a lesson." "Well, lesson learned. Now get off Patrick's property." He stared at me, a stranger. The daughter he thought he could crush was gone. In her place was someone he didn't recognize and, more importantly, someone he couldn't control. He got in his car, slammed the door, and sped off, kicking up a cloud of dust. When he was gone, my knees finally buckled. Patrick caught me. "I've got you, Mia, it's over." He really did it," I whispered, the reality setting in. "He sold it all." "He did," Patrick said, guiding me into the shop. "But we're getting it back, and more importantly, you are free." The rest of the day was a blur. The delivery truck from Henderson's arrived. My tools, my benches, my grandfather's precious wooden case. It was all there. I spent hours just touching them, taking inventory, tears of relief streaming down my face. Nothing was broken. Nothing was missing. But the real fallout was just beginning. My phone, which had been quiet during the confrontation, erupted. This time, it wasn't my mother. It was Miles. I answered, putting it on speaker. "What did you do?" he roared, his voice cracking with panic. "What did you do, MIA?" "I got my tools back, Miles," I said calmly, polishing a chisel. "My tuition, the payment was declined. The entire family fund is empty. Dad said you tricked him, you had him arrested." "I didn't have him arrested, though I could have," I said. "He was forced to return the money he stole from me. He sold my property to a legitimate dealer under false pretenses. That's called fraud, Miles. You're a law student, you should know that. But that was my money, he sputtered. That was for my future. You've ruined me. I'm going to be kicked out. All for your stupid guitars. There it was, the entitlement, raw and exposed. The belief that his future was the only one that mattered, that mine was just a hobby that could be liquidated for his convenience. My stupid guitars are my life, Miles, I said, my voice hardening. A life I've been building while you've been coasting. You want a future? Go get a job. I've had 2 of them since I was 16. You can start by selling that laptop I paid for. He was speechless. The idea of him working was so foreign, so offensive, it had short-circuited his brain. Goodbye, Miles, I said. Mia, wait, don't hang up, you have to fix this. Talk to Dad, tell him to sell something else, sell your wood, that's worth money, right? Dad said you stole all his lumber. I hung up, I blocked his number. Then I blocked my mother's, and finally I blocked my father's. The silence in the workshop was absolute. It was just me, my tools, and the scent of wood. But the fight wasn't quite over. That evening, as Patrick and I were closing up, my mother's car pulled into the driveway. She got out, looking frail and terrified. I met her at the door, blocking her entrance. Mia, please, she begged, her eyes red from crying. You have to come home, your father. He's a broken man. Miles is. He's beside himself. He's locked in his room. This is tearing us apart. It's not this that's tearing you apart, Mom, I said, my heart aching with a sadness that was deeper than anger. It's been torn for years. I just stopped letting you all stitch it back together with pieces of me. But he's your father, she cried, as if that explained everything. He loves you, he just makes mistakes. He's practical, that's all. He didn't understand. He didn't want to understand, I said. He understood that I had something of value and he took it. And you stood by and let him. You told me to be nice and not make a scene while he was selling my grandfather's legacy. I didn't know, she whispered. You didn't ask, I corrected her. You never asked. You just told me to be quiet and think of Miles. I'm done thinking of Miles. I'm done being quiet. What are we going to do? She wept. Miles's school, your father, he's so ashamed, he can't face anyone. That's not my problem anymore, Mom, I said. It was the hardest sentence I'd ever spoken. You all need to figure out how to live without me as your emergency fund. I'm sure Miles will make a great lawyer if he can figure out how to pay for it. Maybe Dad can sell his golf clubs. She flinched as if I'd struck her. That apparently was a line too far. You've changed, Mia, she said, her voice turning cold. You've become hard. No, Mom, I said, looking her straight in the eye. I'm not hard, I'm just finally finished. Goodbye. I closed the door to the workshop, turned the deadbolt and walked away, leaving her alone in the driveway. A week passed. It was the most peaceful week of my life. I moved my things into the apartment above the shop. Patrick, seeing my drive and my renewed focus, officially promoted me from apprentice to junior luthier, with a matching raise. For the first time, I was breathing air that wasn't thick with resentment and obligation. My family, however, was imploding. I knew this because Patrick had a friend who was a member of my parents' golf club. The gossip was apparently spectacular. Arthur hadn't been seen at the club in days. Miles, it was rumored, had been forced to drop out of law school for the semester and was, to the horror of the entire community, working as a barista. The family fund was not just empty, it was overdrawn. The $25,000 I'd forced Arthur to return was, it turned out, the last of their liquid savings. The sale of my tools had been an act of pure desperation, a final, unethical cash grab to keep the perfect family illusion afloat. I felt a pang of something, not guilt but a deep, hollow sadness. They had destroyed themselves. The climax didn't happen in a public showdown. It was something far quieter and in its own way, far more devastating. It was a Saturday. I was in the shop, sketching out a new guitar design, finally using the Brazilian rosewood I had guarded for so long. The front bell jingled. I looked up and my heart stopped. It was Miles. He looked terrible. His expensive, styled hair was a mess. He was wearing his new barista uniform, a sickly green polo shirt with a coffee stain on the collar. He looked tired and, for the first time in his life, small. "Mia," he said. He didn't sound angry, he just sounded empty. "Miles," I said, setting my pencil down. "You shouldn't be here." "I know. Patrick let me in. He's outside." He looked around the workshop, at the rows of tools hanging neatly on the walls, at the beautiful instruments in various states of completion. This is really amazing." "It's my life's work," I said simply. He nodded, running a hand through his hair. I didn't get it. I just thought. I don't know what I thought. I just knew that I had a path and you were just here." "I was never just here, Miles," I said. "I was working, harder than you most days." "I see that now," he said. He looked down at his own hands, soft and unmarked, then at mine, which were covered in calluses and small nicks. I'm sorry, Mia." I stared at him. I had been prepared for more yelling, for more demands, for more entitlement. I had never, in 20 years, been prepared for an apology. "I'm sorry," he said again, and this time his voice broke. "I was an idiot. I was a spoiled, entitled idiot. I just took, and I never even saw what you were giving up. I never saw you." Tears were rolling down his face, and they weren't the crocodile tears of a kid who'd been caught. They were real. "When the tuition payment bounced," he continued, "I thought my life was over. I screamed at you. I screamed at Dad. I screamed at Mom. And then, Dad finally told me." "Told you what?" "Everything, that the family fund wasn't a fund. It was just his paycheck and your paycheck. That he'd been covering my rent, my car payments, my bar tabs, everything. That he'd cashed out his own retirement plan 2 years ago to keep me in school. That he was going to lose the house." The air left my lungs. Lose the house. "He sold your tools because the bank was going to start foreclosure proceedings next month," Miles whispered. "He needed $25,000, not for my tuition, for the mortgage." He had lied. He had lied to Henderson, he had lied to Miles, and he had lied to me. He had used Miles's tuition as a cover story to hide his own catastrophic failure. He had sacrificed my future not for his son's, but to hide his own shame. Miles was sobbing now, a full, ugly cry. "I've been such a fool, I told him he had to fix it, he had to tell you." The bell jingled again. My father walked in. He looked 10 years older. His shoulders were slumped, his face ashen. He wasn't the roaring patriarch. He was just a small, defeated man. He looked at me, at Miles, and then at the floor. "He's right, Mia," Arthur said, his voice barely audible. "It was for the house. I've made a mess of everything. I was so obsessed with Miles being a success, with looking successful. I ruined us, and I violated you in the worst way." He reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small, velvet bag. I couldn't get it all back," he said. "The dealer, he had already sold this. I had to buy it back from the new owner. I had to sell my car." He poured the contents into his palm. It was my grandfather's tools. The small, hand-worn chisels, the spoke shaves. I'm so sorry, Mia," he said, holding them out. His hand was shaking. It's not enough, but it's what I could do." I looked at the tools. I looked at my brother, who was watching me with a look of desperate hope. I looked at my father, a man who had built his entire identity on pride, and was now standing before me, utterly broken. This was the climax, not a public humiliation, but a private, devastating confession. The family fund was a lie. The golden child was a prop, and the practical man was a fraud. I took a deep breath, I walked forward, and I took the tools from his hand. My fingers closed around the familiar wooden handles of my grandfather's tools. They felt warm, like a piece of my past returned. Thank you, I said. My voice was quiet, but it echoed in the silent workshop. Arthur seemed to shrink. Mia, he began, I will pay you back for the $25,000. I'm getting a second job, nights. Dad, Miles said, wiping his face. Stop. He looked at me. We're not here to ask for anything, He had to give those back, and I had to apologize. I looked at the two of them, the man who had nearly destroyed me and the boy who had enabled him. They were different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw Brit. A humility. This wasn't a happily ever after moment. A lifetime of resentment and betrayal couldn't be erased by one apology. The trust was not just broken, it was pulverized. I'm glad you're working, Miles, I said, turning to him. It'll be good for you. It is, he admitted. I'm not going back to law school. Not for a while. I'm going to community college for accounting. I need to learn how money actually works. I nodded, a spark of genuine respect. That's a good plan. I turned to my father. You sold my tools. You lied to me. You lied to Miles. You almost lost your house, and you were going to let me and Miles believe it was his fault, all to protect your pride. He flinched, but he nodded. Yes, that's the truth. I can't forgive you for that, I said. Not today, maybe not ever, I don't know. I understand, he whispered, looking at the floor. But, I continued, you're still my family, and you're a mess. I took a deep breath. This was the hardest part. I won't let you lose the house. They both looked up, shocked. I'm not giving you money, I said quickly, holding up a hand. I'm not the family fund, but the wood I took from the shed, it's worth a lot of money. I walked over to the stack of Brazilian rosewood. This wood, it's too much for me, I'm not ready for it, but John Henderson, he'll buy it, he'll pay top dollar. Mia, no, Arthur said. That's yours, I can't take any more from you. You're not taking it, I said. I'm selling it, and I'm going to give you a loan. A formal, legal loan with an interest rate. Miles, with your new accounting skills, you can draft the paperwork. You will pay me back $500 a month for the next 10 years. Miles stared at me, his mind clearly doing the math. Mia, that's more than fair, that's generous. It's not generous, I said. It's practical, it's business. It's the only way this family can ever move forward, on truth and on contracts. My father looked at me, and for the first time, I think he truly saw me, not as his failed project, but as an adult, as a professional. Okay, Mia, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Okay, business, I can do that. They left soon after. Miles promised to email me a draft of the loan agreement. My father just gave me one last, haunted look and walked out the door. The next day, I sold the rosewood to Henderson. He gave me a phenomenal price. I transferred the funds to my father's mortgage account, and the foreclosure was stopped. That evening, I received a meticulously detailed PDF in my email. Loan agreement, A last name and M last name. It wasn't a reconciliation, not a full one. I didn't go back for Sunday dinners. I didn't call my mother and pretend things were normal. But it was a start. Miles and I started texting, not about the past, but about his accounting classes. My father sent me a single text a month later. Payment sent. Thank you. My life was at Patrick's shop now. I had my own apartment, my own work, my own future. My tools were back where they belonged, and my grandfather's chisels felt perfect in my hand. I was building a guitar, my first official commission as a junior luthier. It was made of flamed maple and spruce, and I knew, as I ran my hand over the smooth, sanded curve, that it was going to sing. I had lost the illusion of the perfect family, but I had gained something so much more valuable. I had gained myself.